Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to JAT Workshop and Design, where we go through my Voron 0.2 build and get the frame assembly all complete. This is going to be a fairly long video, but I did get it shortened down from about 2.5 hours down to around 50 minutes. So there's not a whole lot of talking in this one, but I do highlight quite a few points within the build of things to do. Especially the starting, getting everything organized for the most part for this step, and as well as some of the things to focus on in the build process of your Voron 0.2 also. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll get right to it. The main thing that you always want to start off with is lay everything out, make sure you have everything, and get all of the extrusions laid out in their correct numbering or lettering, I guess in this case. So main thing with this Fysetc kit, it does include its own bed, and a lot of the kits that include the Kirigami do this the same way. There's going to be a few extrusions you don't need for the original bed layout with the extrusions. So once you've got them all sorted out, you can pull them out. That is going to be the, I believe it's the G, and the it's going to be the ones with the 2 holes and no holes, and then threaded on the ends. You are not going to need these ones. So pull those out, set those to the side. You're going to have 1 A, you're going to have 9 B's. You're going to have 2 C's, which are threaded in the Fysetc kit, but they do not need to be. It's the same ones as the H extrusions, which were the ones for the bed. The H extrusions are normally threaded, so just know when you get this kit, these will be threaded, so just don't get them confused. And then there will be the next one, which is the D extrusions, which look just like the C's, except for they also have a single hole on one side and 2 holes on that side. The E extrusion is just going to be the single hole offset a little bit further in, and there will be 4 of those. The Fysetc kit will include the lightweight gantry. It's like a scaffold design. It's pretty cool. And then the PCBs, there is 10 of these here, 2 for each linear rail basically, and there is silver on one side and gold on the other. It's just little stickers on this side, but it's the side that sticks out. When you insert these into the rail on this kit, you will put the larger side of the nut down, so when you tighten it up, it has more to pull through. Some people like to put it upside down. They claim that, you know, it's tighter up against the rail, less likely to loosen up. The nuts are larger on either way. I prefer it down, that way there's more clamping force. Personal preference, but a couple kits prefer it the other way depending on their preloaded nuts here. The other thing I did here is lay out all of the copper pillars, the nuts, the bolts, etc., all of the labeled ones here, and just kind of went through them with the bill of materials just to make sure all the components were here. And then the other very important thing, if you've never done a build on your own before, linear rails do not come pre-packed or pre-greased. So put them in a sandwich baggie, take some 99.9% isopropyl alcohol. I'll put a link to this down below on Amazon. Stuff is incredibly cheap. Put that in there about halfway up, and then just periodically slide those rails up and down a little bit. And what that does is it dissolves the shipping oil and stuff in there. I double bag it because my first baggie started leaking. As you can see here, I got some oil in that second bag already. Let it soak. You only need about 10 minutes or so. I let mine soak a little bit longer. And then once you're all done, and once these ones are done, we'll pull them out and we'll grease them. You want to grease these well before assembly. That way you can, I'll show you guys how to do that. Preload the grease from the backside. And it makes it a whole lot easier than sitting there trying to slide it all the way out and then pack grease in and then get it to slide back in without losing any of those balls. So anyway, we're going to go through here. I'm going to lay out the stuff for the first step and we'll be back with you shortly. Alright, we're back with you. I got these all soaked over. I went ahead and let them soak overnight so they are nice and cleaned out. We're going to go ahead and pull these out. Get these dried off. I got some thread locker for the pieces that go into the non-printed parts, so like the main frame assembly, etc. I got some of that. For lubing the linear rails, we got some mobile grease, Mobilux EP2, and then I bought some syringes to make it easier to put into the linear rails from the backside. 20 milliliter bottles, preloaded the grease into that so we can do that. And I've also slid the PCBs into the rails, minding the holes in the top here so that I can get those loaded. And then we got all of our printed parts here finally done. So we went with the blue flop to purple with the green fronts there. Same for the side skirts. And then I custom made a fan shroud for the rapid burner. Added the little demon horns here to it. And if you guys want that file, just let me know and I will upload it to my Maker World account so you guys can have something like this also. Basically the only thing I saw out there prior was the cat ears or the standard, so something different to be out in the world is always a nice thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and shoot you over to a time lapse until the next important part here. I'm gonna pull these out and start working on those. Alright, so if you've never seen this technique before, basically what this is doing is going into the back of the screw hole here, which is open access to the carriage. And what this does is by forcing grease in through one of these bolt holes, it forces it directly into the carriage, and it's kind of once it fills the carriage, it squeezes it out the side here. So what I'll generally do is on one end of the carriage, I'll do it, slide it back and forth a bunch, and then go to the other side of the carriage, do it again. That way, as the balls go around and move back, you're kind of accessing the different balls just to make sure that they're all thoroughly done. A lot of people will just go to the center, fill it up once, and call it good. I like to do the twice just to make sure there's plenty of grease and everything in there, because I don't want to have to redo this more often than needed, and it should make these rails last a bit longer. Next thing you're going to want to do is go back through here and clean all this extra grease off, because you don't want dust, hair, if you have pets or anything like that to stick to this and start gritting up these rails. So that's what I'm going to move to here next, and then we'll get to putting them on the extrusion. Alright, so on these, the first ones are going to be 38 millimeters from the end on the side with the hole in it. I have this nice little metric ruler, makes that pretty easy. And then I will put the both ends in first, and then I'll put the center two in. The two ends just for locating. Then the next ones I'll put in, I'll use Loctite on. And then I'll take the end two back out and then Loctite those. I am using blue on this. You should be using purple. I am just going to use the tiniest dab possible here, just for peace of mind. By tiniest dab, you can barely see the tip of that turn blue there. So. And then on these holes, you do every other screw hole here. So in other words, you should have 5 total screws per extrusion. Not super tight, just enough to hold it perfect, and your Loctite will do the rest. And also at this point, your rail stoppers will be out now, so do not slide that rail carrier off the end, or else you're not going to have a good time trying to get that back together. The other thing you should be doing in this process is you should have printed 2 of these rail spacers. So you will generally have these down on there before you tighten it up. And what those do is just center up that on the rail, which it looks like mine is slightly off because I forgot about that step here. So we'll loosen it up real quick and drop that into place, and then give these a quick little snug. On Loctite you do have a little bit of time to work with, but not a whole lot. Luckily this was a quick enough catch here that it's not going to affect you. Of course I need that. Alright, next here we're going to move on to the Z rails. I also have these preloaded, and there is holes on both ends here on this one. And I'm basically just going to go through the same process and keep it. Alright, now that we got those rails installed on these 4 extrusions, go ahead and take the little rubber plugs if you got them with your kit or got them with your rails. Put those back in. That way, just in case if you drop one of these extrusions or something like that, you know, that stops and isn't just going to fall out on you. So I went ahead and got all 4 of mine back together. And then the Z extrusions are 33 millimeters from the end, roughly. one thing you can do is you can start the nut on it, and then slide it in attached to the nut, and then you just butt that up to your rail. And that's all you gotta do. Alright, and this is where the Voron manual gets a little confusing. On those first two extrusions, the picture itself showed you installing these two. It does not say anything about a nut though. So if the nut is basically common sense that you need a nut, or it's not a nut that's installed now for a later use, it just doesn't tell you. So anytime it tells you to install a screw or something like that, just know that you'll also need a nut at the same time, because it does not just tell you. The other thing that's nice to print out is the no drop nuts. I did not print any of those, so I do not have any. So we're just going to go ahead and do it the old-fashioned way, which is a little bit inconvenient, but it is what it is. And on this one, I only had to preload 2 extra into one of these rails, not both of these rails, so again, I should have been a little bit more cautious on what I'm reading. So, and that is going to be the bottom rail that gets the extra ones. Okay, so this is going to be a very important step for some of you. Once we get this set up like this here, we do have our 3 nuts loaded on each backside here. But on this here, if you need to preload any additional nuts for add-ons or accessories that you're doing to this machine, say if you're doing a clicky probe or anything like that, now is going to be the best time possible to go ahead and load those. So it's going to be very important for you to have, pre-planned your build here. I'm going to be doing a clicky probe also, or a 0 click. There is a couple different ways we can do this without having to preload to add them after the fact. But if it is a fresh new build, it is definitely easier to just go ahead and preload the nuts now. Or if you have plenty of extra nuts, if you've self-sourced or ordered extras, you can go ahead and throw in a couple extra nuts here and there for future accessories that you might add. So just keep that in mind. Alright, on this step here, basically it has you box in this rail. These side extrusions, it really doesn't matter which ones you grab as long as it's one with the holes on the top and bottom. These are temporary, you will take these back off. It is just to square it up so that you can line these up easier. From the end of this extrusion, so the inside of the outside one, to the inside of this one, so this gap here should be 58 millimeters, roughly, as long as it is square. As long as it is square, top and bottom, and you got a good 90-degree here, you'll be good, and then it will be adjusted later on. Now on this part here, on the bed that you decide to use, is going to change the spacer that is required here. Whether you have the Kirigami, the standard extrusion bed, or if you have the CNC bed from Fysetc, they will all three have different spacers. So just keep that in mind that you print the correct one. If you have a Fysetc kit, it's a bit tricky to understand of how to find their specific STLs. If you go to their website and then in the description, the link is actually the BOM. So if you've never really cared what their BOM is, but you went ahead and bought the kit, that is actually a link to their GitHub that has everything. Their extra STLs, their specific documentation, etc., etc. So make sure you go to that. It does have some updated files also for the uppers, I believe it is here. So the uppers will actually have indentations on these two outer ones. Where the standard ones do not. These are mirrored ones, but the factory ones do not have little indents. Now, if that's something to do specifically with the Fysetc kit or not, I don't know, but this does have indents for something to do with difference in their kit, so make sure you follow that. Now this is where you would normally square this up here, but mine moves pretty freely. I mean, I'm not even 45 up and that thing is dropping on its own power. She's nice and square. And this is, we're gonna have to call it for the night. It is getting pretty late here, approaching 12:30 a.m. I gotta be up early in the morning for work. So we're gonna stop it here and pick it up tomorrow. I don't know if this will be a part 1 of the video or we'll break it into part 2 starting on the next day here. But so far we're currently just under 2 hours into this build. Feel like we made some pretty good progress getting all the rails attached and the main part of the frame here, only a couple parts not attached. Main reason I want to call it here also is I want to install a clicky probe on this, so I'm not sure if I need to preload a couple nuts into here or where I want to install that clicky. So thanks for watching up to this point, guys. Hope you learned something. Alright guys, new day here. Gonna go ahead and get started on this. I just finished up the nut check on this, going through making sure all the nuts are in place, etc. So on the top of the bottom extrusions here, I do plan on adding a Nevermore to this kit. So I just went ahead and added 2 here, and I added 2 here for future use. I'm not sure which side I want to put it on, so I just went ahead and added those in just for future proof, not having to take this apart when I want to change something. And then I did pull this one back off again and added 2 in here. I printed my print head here with the use for the clicky NG, the no glue or next generation on this side, and then I did add on this side for the zero click mod. So I'm not sure which one I wanted to use, so I printed my print head with both in mind, as it doesn't really hurt to just have it there in case I want to change it in the future without having to reprint this whole print head. Adds very little material here. As you can see, it's just that tiny little nub there and tiny little nub yeah, here. So, and you can't see it if it's installed if you decide to not use it. So I added 2 nuts here, and then in the Y extrusion on the bottom here, I'm going to preload 2 into the bottom of this also. Even though I may not need it, I just want it there for future use. And if you're worried about rattling in the future, basically all you have to do is take an extra screw and tighten the screw down, and that is going to stop it from rattling in the future. And then you just take those screws out whenever you decide you want to use those nuts. So like I said earlier in the video, it never hurts to add extra nuts now and be future prepared if there's something you want to add down the line versus having to tear an extrusion back off this machine, etc. in the future. So just something to keep in mind. So now we're to the step where I'm going to be adding the D extrusion. Alright, so it doesn't really tell you on the D rails here. There's 2 holes on one end and 1 hole on the other. Just remember the top of this here is open as far as this frame is concerned. So the 2 holes will go on the bottom so that way you can access this screw and this screw. And the extra one will be facing this way towards this one. So it should be pretty self-explanatory, but you may be confused just not knowing where to put it, thinking there might be something to go here in the future. And then in assembling all of these for the final tightening, just make sure you are flush end to end on all of these. As far as twisting or anything like that goes, make sure it's not twisted and it's nice and straight. Alright, basically what I was doing right there is just double checking this here. I did have this rail just a little far out this way, so loosening one side, you were able to slightly force that down just enough to get both sides flush now. And then I did double check the bed, make sure the bed is still sliding smoothly, which it is. And you can also adjust that by loosening that up and just moving that a little bit with that up here. And then I did take my handy dandy ruler here and then measure from the inside of this extrusion to the inside of this one. I got 58 millimeters and did the same here and also got 58 millimeters. So it is nice and square. And then just go ahead and double check these ones, which I got 58 millimeters, and double check this one, also coming out right at 58 millimeters. So that should tell us that everything is nice and square, squarer than my table is here. And we should be good to move on to the A and B drives. So we're going to call that for the video for part 2. Again, so far getting to this point is a pretty simple task. One thing I do want to mention that I also happen to overlook and or not think is this bed here. There is some bits and pieces that are specific to this bed that I did forget to install ahead of time, and that is going to be basically the parts and pieces for the waggle mount, and that's really it. So I will have to install that. Nice thing is it does not have to be out of the printer to install those. So just remember, if you do get this kit, that is not announced in the manual for the Voron kit, but it is explicitly stated in the Fysetc supplemental basically instructions. There is, let's go to that kit here quick, basically telling us there's only about 4 different things. Page 18, the nut adapter strips, basically it's just telling you about the PCBs for this here, basically these pieces here for the nuts. That's 18, so we should be able to figure that one out pretty easy. Page 36 is the frame component prep, and what that is, it's linking you to a video for the prep for this bed. Everything else is in line with the Voron kit instructions. Next one is going to be page 120, assembling the X-axis, because of that whole special gantry. So there is some specific parts to this that will need addressed, and then way later on, will probably be episode 5 or something off by the time we get to this part. But the electronics and wiring will also be a little bit different on this, because this will be utilizing that catalyst board. And then everything else from there will be firmware and OS. So hope you all enjoyed watching up to this point. I know it wasn't super exciting and it's more of just a video tutorial here, but hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you like the build so far. And once we get to the wiring and stuff like that, we'll get a little bit more in depth here, and a little bit more action in the build. So I hope you all have a great day, and see you all next time here at JAT Workshop and Design.